الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه أجمعين. The topic for today is I need help, balancing the virtual world with the real world. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in His Quran al-Kareem, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Verily we have created you or made you a people of what? Being strikingly in the middle, people of moderation, people of balance, between spirituality and work, between family and community, between friends and other obligations. And inshallah, we have two speakers here today that will begin to tell us how to reach that balance, or the merits of the great beauty that comes after we attain that balance, inshallah, between what we like to do and what we should do, between the spiritual and between the physical, inshallah. Our first speaker is Brother Altaf Husain. He's a native of Cleveland, Ohio. And his research interests include the integration of immigrant and refugee families, especially Muslim adolescents, into the United States. Dr. Husain is a former two-term national president of the MSA, Muslim Students Association, a current executive committee member of the Muslim Alliance in North America, MANA, a faculty member of Compass, the state-of-the-art management training program of MSA National. He's the chair of the Leadership Development Committee of the Islamic Society of North America, ISNA, and the Peaceful Families Project, dedicated to the prevention of domestic violence. Dr. Husain also lives with his family in Northern Virginia. فليتفضل. This like stuff is shaking.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله أصحابه أجمعين. My dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. You sound like you were over in the Sheraton and walked here and then climbed the stairs. Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, I was like all casual, finished praying Maghrib, prayed Isha, kind of walking around and think I have 10, 15 minutes, I can go to my session. And then I go, information desk. I said, is the next youth session here? They go, no, Embassy Suites. So I had to run up, get my jacket, and then get over here. Saw the long line for the elevator, and then these two sisters in front of me, mashallah, had great wisdom. And they said, we should take the stairs. And nobody said how many stairs we would be taking. I was like hello, like a father of three, like used to be MSA. This topic is very important, and inshallah, in the next few minutes, we hope to do justice to a little bit of what could be said in a short time. But to be very frank about it, it is something that Muslims should be concerned about more than anybody else on earth, because we value time. And I'll speak about other things, but that's the perfect place to start, because time essentially is the only thing that we cannot reverse as it leaves us. So even what I said a few minutes ago is technically history. Just a few minutes ago what I said, whatever words left my mouth, are technically history. Ibn al-Qayyim, hafidhullah, said that wasting time is worse than death. Are you ready to do some like repeating? Say it with me. Wasting time. You sound like you're wasting time right now. Put it down, walk away from the machine, right? So wasting time is worse than death because, okay, all right, you're losing it. Just stay, I'll just do it. Just listen, right? Wasting time is worse than death because death separates you from this world while wasting time separates you from Allah. Did you get that? You want to walk up the stairs again? Listen to that. Wasting time is worse than death because death just separates you from this world, whereas wasting time separates you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So first and foremost, we Muslims are not against technology. This is not a lecture to tell you to, get off Facebook It's not to tell permanently. It is not to tell you to not to use Twitter. It is not to tell you to not text. It is not to tell you to not use any technology. This is not what that is. The title says it all. It says, I need help. So some of you, this may be like, I don't know why I'm here. I didn't really need help. Others of you were like, I so need help. I am updating my status right now. All right? It may be you. It may be you. And if that's you, then we'll make collective dua for you, inshallah, to help you. But if you're somewhere in between, you may actually be of those who think that you're okay. But in reality, you're, as the counselor will tell you, in massive denial. You're not the pre-med that's going to be the MD. You're the MD now. You're in massive denial, right? So that's something that you need help, especially for, because you haven't even realized that you have a problem, right? So you're living in the virtual world. We need you in the real world. And the problem, and I'll talk about 3 main points, is that the bridge between the cyber world, the virtual world, and the real world is something that seems to be disappearing slowly and slowly, whereas people who seem to be extremely functional in the virtual world are literally dysfunctional, unable to establish relationships in the real world, unable to carry out basic interpersonal interactions in the real world. So we are not against technology, so let's just be clear about that. Secondly, humanity in general is in need of research, because we have not even grasped, beginning to grasp the impact of the technology that has unfolded literally in the last 5 years. If you are in the audience, raise your hands when I say this next word if it means anything to you. Dial up. If it means something to you, dial up. It's not a new hip-hop song or like a key. It's a form of technology that we used to use, where you used to use your home phone line to do, and then you'd go, oh, because dad picked up the other phone, like, get off the phone, I'm on the internet, right? You remember that? See, he related to that. I can relate to that because, I lived through it, right? So dial-up was the way we accessed technology. Now, raise your hands if you actually have a clue what I'm talking about when I say a modem, right? A modem. Do you pronounce it differently in Chicago? Like, a what? A modem, right? So, so you see what I'm talking about. Router, right? Router, you may know what a router is, right? You know what Twitter is, right? 3 years ago, 4 years ago, only the birds were tweeting, am I right? Right? Now, human beings, I want to be just like the bird, right? I have nothing to say, but I will say it anyway in 140 characters, right? And then I'm teaching at the master's level, I'm talking to professors around the country, and we're all like, how come they can't write? Because they can only go up to 140 characters in abbreviation, right? That's a problem. So humanity hasn't grasped the impact, not only on our intellect, not only on our interpersonal relationships, interactions. Pediatricians will tell you, we haven't yet fully grasped what an infant might be experiencing if you leave the phones, especially the smartphones that are drawing in lots of energy, radioactivity, everything within the confines of their area where their brains are developing. So these are things that are going to need to be researched, but we still don't say stop using all of this. We say that there are some points to be concerned about, and inshallah, in closing, I'll give very practical terms. The Islamic guidelines are universal. They're comprehensive, they're timeless. You'll hear me say that in different lectures because I mean it, it's true, it's the reality. So everything that we look for in technology, if it serves the purposes of drawing us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, absolutely no issues. But when we become victim to technology, when we become slaves to technology, we have issues. Number one, the major challenge is that in the cyber world, in the virtual world, you and I, even as adults, but especially those who are, it's a youth session, so who are younger, may be experiencing premature exposure to content which your brain and your emotions are not yet ready to process. The brain and the emotional maturity that goes along with it, every second that we're receiving an input, Our brains can process that. I mean, they can receive it. But whether or not we can process it is a matter of socialization, is a matter of actually being aware of what's happening in front of you. My son Ahmed is 6. And just a couple days ago, he told my wife, literally, that, he goes, I'm sad, but I don't know why, right? He's 6. So he's experiencing something, and here's a child, our children, they don't watch TV. 20 minutes of video time a week. 20 minutes of online time a week. One sweet day a week, meaning like one dessert of something that we would have to, have control over. And he's saying that I'm feeling sad, I don't know why. So we're talking it through with him. But now imagine you're online and you take in images that show you passion, anger, love, envy, jealousy, hate, revenge, right? Images of violence, right? Not just one person being killed, but killed in the most brutal ways, right? Corpses being shown to you. Imagery that there's absolutely no way a human being could ever be prepared to have been socialized to say, oh, this is okay. But you're receiving it without having a clue on what to do with it, how to process it. Our nation is only now tragically beginning to have a conversation of what the compounded effect of constant online activity, constant exposure to such imagery may be having on our children in the form of desensitization to the worst of what human beings are capable of doing, and that unfolded in Connecticut. One bullet that ricocheted off of a wall of the assault weapon that was used, one bullet went through the school building, and I'm assuming it's a window, and actually went into a car parked farther away in the parking lot. If you saw the way the bullet exited the metal of the car body, you would faint to think what a 6-year-old body, how a 6-year-old body could have withstood that at close range with minimum of 2 to 11 bullets per body. How is a human being capable of doing that? Is it everything to do with entertainment? Maybe not. Is it everything to do with online? Maybe not. But premature exposure to such things could desensitize you because, hey man, if you grew up at a time when a boy, 20 years old, walked in, took out 20 kids between 6 and 10, 6 teachers, a principal altogether, 27, you're like, man, bring anything else on. I could do it. I could take it, right? That was it. Because you don't grasp it. You don't understand that there were lives associated with those 27 people, and subhanAllah, what is the impact of that? Lack of focus, right? I find myself now, subhanAllah, I have to stop myself. I'll be working on a journal article, right? I'll need a reference. So I'll go online to the university website to access the journal database. If that's slow loading up, I will actually, if I don't watch myself, click my email inbox to see if something appeared, and if it's my personal account, then it doesn't signal me, I don't have it set up like that, but my Outlook for work shows the header pop up that I have a new email, so I'll actually, if I don't watch myself, click on that to see what was sent, and if they sent a link, I will actually click on that link in that email, and my foremost activity was to synthesize my ideas in this journal article. And ultimately, I actually ended up doing 4 unrelated activities. You with me? Right? I'm admitting to it because why? We are not perfect. But this lack of focus, there's way too much potential for us to become overwhelmed with too much information. These companies hire some of the brilliant psychologists, people who can get into your minds, people who understand neuroscience to say, what is the fastest way I can distract this person through imagery, color schemes, sounds, right? The pace at which the activity unfolds. What is the impact of all of that? On focus. And your religion, our religion, is constantly telling us, concentrate, have khushu, focus, focus, focus. When you stand in salah, you're standing in front of Allah. But if you've just left online gaming, you've just left Facebook, and you've been going online, and you've been updating statuses, liking things, and somebody puts up a picture, and you're like, mashallah, that's hot, right? Somebody puts up some music, that's hot, right? Something else, that's hot. Hot is the temperature of hell. Let me just be frank with you. You're being very open with what you're saying, because almost everything you're doing, you know displeases Allah, but it's also losing focus, because your focus is to use technology, not to become victim by it, and then start doing these things that distract you from the main purpose. Too much unrelated information is distracting to the brain. Why? Because the brain attempts to process all of it. All of it. Perhaps not simultaneously, but it will attempt. And that's why, after all of these games and these, I don't even bother to care to know the names. At some point, I used to give these lectures and I used to try to look up the names because I had never played anything. And I would look up the names and my wife was like, you're gonna at some point be so behind the times because there's new stuff coming out. But I do know there's one game where, especially, mashallah, the brothers, may Allah bless you, right, are out there stealing cars, right, in different cities, and being the best gangster of a jacked up, stolen car is the way to go. What is it called? Sisters, please don't embarrass me. They're like, I know, it's equal opportunity. Please, sisters. What is it, brothers? Yeah, right? Are you kidding me, right? Is that real life? Is that what we're raising you to do? Go out there and steal? And then become the best at it, right? You can't. You do that, you come in salah, Allahu Akbar, you're like, right? This stage already is shaking, and you're starting salah, you're like, or you've been watching something funny, you're like, right? It's human nature. Your brain just took a lot of it in, and it's not just going to go away because you said Allahu Akbar. You wish it could go away. You wish it could go away, but it's not going to go away. So the ability to synthesize, to process, to comprehend intellectually. See, Muslims, we were at the height of civilization. There's an exhibit in Washington, D.C. now called 1001 Muslim Inventions. 1001 Muslim inventions. Look it up online. National Geographic has it. It will shame you compared to where Muslims are today. You will say, those people had focus, man. They read the Quran. They knew the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. They knew the Seerah, the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And then they went out and did something about it. They did something about it. They were the ones who were making istiqamah of the deen, not just through prayer and fasting and this is the fara'id. But they were doing it by being the best examples to other human beings. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهَ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ أَلَّا تَخَافُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, you have fear, anxiety, grief, all these things. You be among those who say Allah is our Lord, establish the religion. Angels will descend. Angels will descend to give you the glad tidings that you have neither fear nor grief. Have focus. This is a major challenge that you're going to be facing. And lastly, as I start to close this out, the worst danger between the cyber world and the real world, that you can't make the bridge, is that you and I are potentially victims of a dual life, right? Of a dual life. And subhanAllah, the potential for having an anonymous, an ID-less presence on the net, or at least the perception of anonymity. Because we think we're anonymous, right? We think you can actually have all these things to kind of hide your identity, be on the DL, like not really, no one knows. Do you know what? They can actually trace the IP address of every device that is on the net. Even the smartphones, your laptop, netbook, iPad, tablet, whatever you have. A man who was convicted of or arrested of abuse in a child abuse case, and basically they were trying to figure out, I think he ended up killing the child, to figure out what was going on. They had actually traced back all of the places he had been, and they figured out he was Googling. They figured out what he was Googling to figure out how to hurt a child. figure out what the ordinances were, what legal recourses he would have. This is kiraman katibin. You're talking about the angels who are writing things, who are recording things, right? We don't believe in it because we're so far from the religion. We're like, that's that. No, that's not that. That's us. The angels on the right and the left shoulder, they're recording things. Even when I think I'm anonymous, in this dunya it's being recorded for sure by the IP address example I gave you. But the angels are already there. My sister Amina, they're living in Qatar now. She has a 6-year-old boy, and he made a mistake of something, and she goes, be careful, the angels are writing everything. And then in a minute, Ibrahim is like, this. She's like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm trying to mess up their writing, right? Because little kids have fitrah, right? They have fitrah. You say it, they believe it. You and I used to be there. You following me? We used to be there. We used to read it, believe it, and think that it's happening. Now we're so far from it. We think we can do something and actually not be traced back to. So this dual identity, dual life, can be a force for thinking in the cyber world that you can lower your defenses, lower your defense mechanisms, and be like, man, I could do this, right? I can say this, and she won't know I sent it, right? Or he won't know, right, that it's me, right? I'll go this way and that way, and I'll, believe it or not, subhanAllah. If they don't know, at least Allah knows. If they don't know, at least Allah knows. And Allah is everywhere, subhanAllah. Umar ibn Abdulaziz, radiallahu anhu, he was, at his time, he was going through an area where there was a young man, an area where he stopped to have a meal. A young man was shepherding the flock. And he told him, come and join us. And he said, I said, no, I'm shepherding this flock. He said, give me just one of the sheep and I'll buy it from you. He said, no, this belongs to the shepherd. So this belongs to the shepherd. He said, no, just give it to me. He won't know and you can eat with us and it'll be okay. And the boy told him, فَأَيْنَ Allah. And where is Allah? Like if this can happen, if we can just do that, so then where is Allah? In this dual life, you have to ask yourself, why everything that we talk about is usually hot, is usually displeasing to Allah? It's because we've even in our human weaknesses labeled it to be the very temperature of that which can and will hurt us. It is true that it will hurt us, and yet we do it. This dual life, brothers and sisters, as I start to close, is something that we have to be very worried about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran to lower our gaze for the men and the women. Everything we take in, and believe me, you want to know how fast data is processed? You walk up to a gas station, you pull out your credit card, you go to pump gas, you literally take your credit card and you go like this. In that instant, they have pinpointed exactly where you are, potentially who you are if you're the owner of that credit card, the time you're using it, what you're using it for. So you don't think our brains are capable of processing that stuff? Yes, we are. We're very capable. So that dual life that you think you're on the DL, you're like really easing and chilling and doing all these things, you got to be careful so that you don't actually end up being victim to so much insensitivity that you actually bring that into the real world. So you actually look at people and you start saying, man, she's hot. Or man, he's really all that. Right? Or even worse, you start using words, speech, that if anything would be displeasing to Allah. And we actually use it so casually. So in closing, very quickly, be conscious of Allah. Be conscious of Allah in the cyber world and in the real world. If there is to be gender interaction, a whole lecture can go on with that. Make sure it's purposeful, it's public, and it's limited. Purposeful, public, and limited. These are Islamic guidelines. We're not saying boys don't talk to girls, girls don't talk to boys, young men don't deal with young women. No, this is artificial. This is not Islam. But it has to be purposeful. It must be public, and it must be limited. Number 2, reflect on the use of the internet. Reflect on your online usage. Make a journal. Document the time you get on, you get off. How often are you checking for new emails? How often are you checking your text? How often are you texting people? Inane things, like really inane things, right? Just checked in, right, at the masjid for Fajr. Dude, try to be a little bit calm about your intentions, right? Right? Ooh, tired from my long sujood, right? In fact, I'm in sujood, right? Dude, what is going on with you, man? What is up with that, right? And Imam told me, I don't make this stuff up. The Imam, it actually happened to him. Cell phone etiquette, talking about online stuff. The Imam is giving khutbah, and the phone rings, and the brother's in front of him, and he's staring at him, hoping to Allah he doesn't answer it. And the man goes, hello? The Imam goes, Yaqeen, no, it's talking in the khutbah. Imam, hold on 1 minute. Right? Dude, where are you? Like, which world are you living in, right? The other brother tried to slap his phone shut when he's in tashahud because he didn't want to disturb the people. He hit the speakerphone. The poor wife is going, hello, hello, where are you? Hello. So he has to calm her down now. So he says, in tashahud. Right? Come on. I mean, give me a break, right? So be conscious of your usage. Are you really that clueless now that you're just texting everywhere? You're like sitting in the khutbah texting, you're in lectures texting, right? I want youth sessions. I have notebooks. I don't make this stuff up. I have spiral notebooks because back then it meant notebook was a notebook, right? I don't see people coming to conferences with notebooks. Dude, how do you go to like Islamic conferences and not take down notes? Other than that, it's just like entertainment. I have spiral notebooks of stuff I learn. It blows me away every time I look at it. Well, not blows me away. Fox News, peaceful gathering, right? Nothing blows us away. We don't blow anything away, right? We don't even blow in the wind, right? So what I meant is I was overwhelmed. I was taken aback. I was surprised, right? But if you need help, get help. If you need help, get help. Admit to the problem and get help. And lastly, you need definitely to have emotional maturity. So think about it. If you're not processing things, go to some college students, people's older siblings, and say, I'm seeing these things, I'm hearing these things. It'll keep it real for you. And inshallah ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it easier for you to really look at some of the amazing things that are being done with technology. Really. If you look at this stuff, man, the fact that we can summon up a loved one, a relative, literally by clicking on the icon for Skype, and dialing, and they're there, that's beautiful. In addition to the Quran, my sons are learning, because they're homeschooled, they literally are learning Quran with a sister who has ijazah from Azhar on Skype, or as they call it, Skype, right? But they're doing it, so we're not against technology. We can definitely use it for our faith, but we cannot become slaves to it. We have to know how to move between the two worlds, and definitely never develop a dual identity. Jazakumullahu khairan. Salam alaikum.
Before we introduce the next speaker, we have an announcement. If anyone finds a lost white 3G iPhone with a black case, Jazakumullahu khair, and then smiley face. Huh? Our next speaker is Brother Edmund Arroyo. He's a licensed clinical social worker and a licensed school social worker. He's a graduate of the University of Illinois at Chicago Jane Addams School of Social Work and Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois. He is the founder of the HeartSpeak Institute, where the goal is to provide counseling and education to individuals, couples, and families in an environment that respects their individual and cultural dynamics. With experience in hospitals, public schools, and a child welfare agency, Edmund has worked with clients on many types of individual, family, and societal issues. He lives in the western suburbs of Chicago with his wife and two children. Brother Edmund Arroyo.
Assalamu alaikum. So technology is something, since I work with teenagers on a regular basis, that we're constantly trying to be tuned into and understanding how it's affecting young people today. And more specifically, I say young people because most of the people, either like Altaf and I at my age, in their 30s, in their 40s, this stuff didn't come out until we were the internet came out when I was in college. So we had a big portion of our life where we weren't exposed to a lot of technology that you are. But most people now, who they say under the age of 27, have had it as a part of their life, their whole life. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. But I want to start off with a story about how a student came into my office. I work in a public high school. She came in and she was telling me about this big argument she got into with her boyfriend, and he said this, and then she said this, and they're telling. And after about 20 minutes, I said, "Wait a second. Were you guys talking?" She said, "No, we were texting." And I said, "So you just had a whole argument and broke up and everything else over a text, over texting? You never thought at any point that this is becoming too emotionally charged, I should call him?" She said, "No." And I said, "Well, then after you have a conversation, come back and talk to me," right? So this is not uncommon, right? This is not uncommon that we're seeing today. People running their relationships electronically. We're seeing this in marriages as well, where I'll talk to some couples and they really cannot talk to each other, but they send emails to each other whenever it's anything of significance. Now, I understand that if you're trying to get over a fight or something as a way of starting off that conversation, but still then they'll avoid having the conversation altogether, which is a problem. So here's a concept I want to introduce to you, the concept of the personal paparazzi. This is something that we're seeing through Facebook, and it started off with, was it MySpace? But basically, here's a situation where you're able to control the feedback, meaning that you could create this image of yourself that you think people would like, that you think is cool, or whatever you want to call it. And if someone gives you negative feedback, you can just block them or eliminate them from your 1,000 friends, right? And so it kind of reinforces, they call this, basically when people get caught up in this, they call it narcissism, where it's just kind of reinforcing my own inflated idea of myself. And that becomes a big problem in relationships. But so when you have these online situations, you have all these 1,000 friends. There's research coming out now that the number of intimate, close friends that you have has in these surveys they do has dropped from 3 to 2 in our society. So people are having less close relationships. And this other point here is that celebrity culture sends this message, and we're falling for it. I mentioned this earlier in the marriage that in the other presentation I gave earlier, that celebrity culture, we have this idea that the harder the image I create, and so in the celebrity culture is that the image I create, the harder I party and document it, or the really cool things that I do and document it, the more famous I am. And what they say, I think in Hollywood is, even bad press is good press or something like that, is positive because it just gives you exposure. And so to the point where this exposure becomes excessive. One of the things that I think the internet, the generation of I'll talk about this later, but the millennials. Raise your hand if you've heard this term, the millennials. Okay. So anyways, basically you've had technology your whole life, but the difference between you and our kids is now that we've had technology in our life, we can give them some guidelines of how to use it, like we are, and like Brother Altaf was saying earlier. But your parents didn't really know technology, so they didn't have guidelines to give you, so you were navigating and often had too much free reign. And so as a result, growing up and trying to navigate through this, exposing your brains to things that you didn't realize the consequences of, has affected how you use the technology. And so often, when I work with young people, I'll say, what in the world made you think it was okay to send that kind of picture of yourself and that he wasn't going to send it to 20 of his friends? Don't you understand that everything in the virtual world is permanent? You can say a really mean thing to a person, but then it's just between you guys unless they can prove it in some way. But if you text it to them or if you email it to them, it is permanent. So not only is it written, but it is written, right? So you suffer in both realms. And they've conforted on to people. And I've had to, people, young women and men that I thought were really good people, and then all of a sudden someone brings something to me like, this is what he put on my Facebook last night. And I'm like, subhanAllah, doesn't he realize that other people are seeing this? How this makes him look? Go kill yourself and phrases like that. And we don't understand how not only does that have an effect on you who wrote it, but also that person could keep rereading it. And it does damage over and over again. So we need to really consider the permanence of anything that you put out there electronically. One of the consequences is social isolation. One of the first things I do in individual counseling is help people try to understand who they really connect and try to reach out to powerful relationships they have in their life to utilize these people as support for themselves. And a lot of times people struggle with that. Social isolation, as you guys can all read here, diminishes happiness, health. It's correlated with substance abuse. So often, one of the things that community does is it normalizes things for you. It makes you realize that other people are experiencing this. We had through Noe Foundation a few years ago, it's probably been about 5 or 6 now, a marriage seminar. We talked about Muslim marriage in America, and Dr. Umar Farooq Abdullah and Dr. Mattson was there. And one of the things I felt that came out of that is all of a sudden everybody started talking about marriage, because I think a lot of people said, like, wow, so that happens to a lot of people? I'm not the only one whose husband likes to take a nap when he comes home from work? Or other ways around, all these things that we get bothered by, right? I'm not the first, my wife's not the only one that talks my head off as soon as I walk in the door, and I'm like, oh, right? So it normalized some things. Otherwise, we get caught up in this feeling of, victim mentality that I'm suffering through this, poor me. And when we isolate ourselves, it allows us to reinforce that and just join other, conversations on the internet of people who are going through this, but also like they're playing the victim as well. So there's not really a real connection there. Correlates with emotional problems, which goes along with what I just said, and then increased aggression and violent crimes. It desensitizes you to human beings and pain and real pain and understanding people's emotions and body language and all these things that help us connect with other human beings. One of the things I want you to think about really is getting real with yourself. Here's some questions to ask yourself. Do you generally spend most of your day on the computer at work or whatever, and then go home to spend more time in front of the computer screen at night? Right? How much time? Maybe it's okay to check your email one time in the evening, whatever, but how much time do you spend doing that? Because every minute that you're spending doing that, you're isolating yourself from the people in your home. And if it's in college, from your roommates. Okay? So, one of the things, before I go to this next one, I used to work in a very poor school district. And one of the things I found out when I moved to the area where I work now, which is largely an affluent community, is that some of the challenges that I saw in the young people in that poor neighborhood were the same challenges caused by the same reason, meaning that in some of the poor neighborhoods, you had a big absence of fathers. When you go to some of these wealthy neighborhoods, there's equally an absence of fathers, but they're just working 80 hours a week, right? So they're not really spending any time. So the kids, their need for attention, their need for affirmation, and all these things that they would get from the interaction with their family members, they're not getting. So another thing, do you eat most of your meals while at the computer or in front of the television, right? Do you need some kind of stimulation instead of really just enjoying that glass of water or saying Bismillah and recognizing that everything you're eating is a blessing from your Creator? One of the things that I did with my son was a really amazing experience. I recommend it to anybody who has young children. As we planted a garden one year, but specifically we planted a watermelon plant from a seed. And for him to witness that seed grow into a little plant, which we then transplanted into the garden, which then my mother-in-law complained about because it invaded all of her tomato plants. But it grew this watermelon that was like 3 times the size of his head. And so we took a picture of it and we cut it open, we ate it, and it was wonderful. But, just that connection with creation, that connection with your environment. So have you changed your plans based on Wi-Fi availability, your vacation plans, right? Actually, I always wonder about that when I'm looking on the internet for vacations. Like it says, people complain about, some of the criticisms on like Expedia or some of these other sites are like, the Wi-Fi was spotty. And I'm like, really? You're on vacation, come on, you're gonna complain about that? I think they only should have Wi-Fi in the lobby. That's the only place. You go there if you really need to check your email. But then, so one of the things that we'll do when we go on vacation is we put our phones in a safe. And we check them at night or in the morning. That's it. So really trying to control that. And we do it, again, this has got to be a family effort. Because if one person says, I'm going to do this, it's hard if you sit at the kitchen table, I'm not ever going to use my phone, and you sit down and everybody else is looking at their phones while they're eating. Right? So it's got to be a group commitment. Does your internet usage cut into the time that you should be spending on personal hygiene? Right? That's when it gets really bad. Right? Oh, I should take a shower, but, I'll just take one tomorrow. Really, I mean, this is a concern. I'll just, instead of dressing like you normally would, you throw on sloppier clothes because you were playing a video game, and then you try to run to class. These kind of things, really consider if you're making a priority in your life. Would you classify yourself as an expert multitasker? Be careful, because the research says that we can't multitask very well at all. Right? There's a concept that they're coming out now with called a brownout. And it's not just in our community. It's the concept that we're overstimulated and we have so much information going on. Our phone, we got to read for school, we got this, we got that you just want to be like, everybody leave me alone. And you just want to not be bothered by anything because you feel like you can't handle anymore. And you're having trouble, your short-term memory, you start losing your short-term memory and these kind of things because your brain is just trying to process so much all at one time from different directions and different sources. And then, are you up in the queue past 3 a.m. On a regular basis? That's really a big concern. Some people will say, someone said this to me the other day, I'm just more of a night person. I said, well, what time do you go to bed? 5 a.m.? I'm like, that's an owl. That's not a night person, A night person is you go to bed at maybe 12, 1 o'clock, right? Morning people get up and they go to bed at 9, 10 o'clock. Okay, they get up early. So usually, if you're that much of a night person, you're spending it on the computer. You're not just sitting there watching movies. You're not talking with friends. You're on the computer doing whatever. So another thing to think about when it comes to this, getting real with yourself, there's a book, oh God, I'm going to blank on it now, that I read, and it's about marriage. And one of the things it says is that nowadays, most infidelity starts in the computer. Most of it starts in the computer. And it also talks about how within very few contacts, if there was somebody who you've had a previous relationship with, even if you just kind of like them, doesn't have to be a physical relationship, very quickly, I think they said within 5 emails or something like that, you'll start talking about intimate things. So we can get caught into these things, and I talked before about thinking that you're not vulnerable to something like this. We need to be really careful about connecting with people of the opposite gender on Facebook. And it's interesting because sometimes I'll get contacts, this happens, we all know if you have Facebook, someone will try to friend me and I'll just say, sorry, I don't friend women I don't know. And they never say anything back. Even women that I knew, girls that I knew in high school that I was kind of friends with, they'll try to friend me. And sometimes I have to give them a little bit more explanation because they're like, well, we were friends in high school. But they usually take it okay. I mean, I always say with all due respect, I think you're a great person, but this is just kind of how I choose to function. So we really need to try to be careful about that. Okay, so just kind of talking about creating some ground rules when it comes to your house and how you use it, your cell phone and your access to different technology. I think, again, multitasking, don't fall for it. Yeah, people like to brag that they can do that, but I guarantee you there's something you're not doing well. And whether it's connecting with people or doing your homework effectively, but with my high school student, our rule is that when you come home, you put your cell phone on the mantle and you can get it once your homework is done. Well, then she started making the argument, but I need it for physics homework because my friends will text me a picture of the problem and then it'll help me figure out how to do it. But that really wasn't quite working because she wasn't doing so well in physics. So I said, you know what, why don't you just give me your phone? And she couldn't follow the rules, so we just turned off the phone. she was really upset. She said, oh, now my physics grade is going to get worse. It's going to get worse, and it's going to be your guys' fault. And we said, okay, well, we'll see. I get help from my friends. We still have a house phone. You can call them. Yeah, but they will sometimes send me pictures. And she had all these arguments. I said, well, get together with them. Have a study group. And we had an answer for everything, the way we used to do it, the way we used to do it. And because along with that text of that picture, physics picture, they're also texting about, oh, yeah, remember what happened in class today and everything else. And then also she's got the computer in front of her. She's watching a video that her teacher put online, and she's got her textbook there. And so it just becomes too difficult. So we need to eliminate that, or any kind of project. No cell phone use during dinner. I think this is huge. There's the old American adage that a family that eats together stays together. It's a wonderful time for you to connect with your family and talk during dinner. And also, I think it's a respect for the food that you're eating. Computers should be in a communal location, especially boys. Believe me, I have a son, and every now and then he'll steal my phone and be somewhere playing Angry Birds or something like that. And so, making sure that we're aware of how much people are having contact with those kind of things. I talked about the multitasking, texting while driving. You hear this is a real problem. We see it all the time despite the campaigns that are out there. And then this concept of mindfulness. Now, I brought this up. Now, this is a Buddhist concept. The reason why I bring it up is because, first of all, this was the practice of the companions of the Prophet, the practice of the Prophet, meaning that they were very aware of their state. Okay? Mindfulness has exploded in this country, and the reason why is technology. Because the practice of mindfulness, let's see, I think I have it on the next slide. Yeah, is being in touch with your surroundings. We talk in the Quran when we're taught to see, a lot of signs in creation, and it's good for them if they but knew. It's about reflecting on different things for those who reflect. Right? We hear these concepts in the Quran all the time, and really this is what it's about. It's about experiencing these things, seeing, hearing. And, it starts with being in creation, first of all, getting out of your house, getting out of concrete walls, walking outside sometimes, smelling the air, right? Looking at things I'm really into nature and outdoors. So you'll be surprised how many times I'm walking and I say, hey, look, there's an eagle. Nobody else saw it. They're all just texting, or they're just missing out on half of what's going on around them. Like I said, just tasting the food that you're eating, being in the present, and being grateful for what you're experiencing. And then the last one they have is thinking. It's a last sense. So it's not just, wow, experience life, but it's also contemplating it. Contemplating life and all of your experiences. And let me go back to what I said. The companions, there's a beautiful story, about Ali ibn Abi Talib, where he was in a battle, and this is really like mindfulness at its best, like being conscious of your state, right? He's in a battle and he's chasing someone, an enemy, where the enemy is trying to kill him, and now he finally has him where he wants him, and he's about to kill him, and the man spits in his face, and he immediately stops and he lets the guy go. And everybody says, the companions come to him and say, why didn't you kill him? What happened? And he said, because in that moment, when he spat in my face, I was going to kill him out of anger and pride for myself rather than for Allah. Right? Isn't that an amazing story? He was aware enough. I mean, how many of us are aware enough in our anger that we can even watch our tongue, what we say? Well, here's a guy that's trying to kill him, and he's about to kill him, and the guy spits in his face, and he realizes, in this moment, I'm only doing it because I hate you for spitting in my face. And he refrains from doing it. So this consciousness, we got to build that within ourselves. And it's not going to happen if we're lost in electronics. Some ways that it's going to happen. First off, solitude. I tell my wife this a lot, as well as I say that the Prophet, peace be upon him, he sought solitude. That's how he received revelation, peace be upon him, right? Being in Cave Hira, he received revelation when he was alone. This is how we connect to our Creator. Because you know what? If we're praying here, a little part of us could be praying because everybody else is praying and we don't want to not pray when everybody else is praying. But if it's just you and your Creator, that also comforts the heart because you're only doing it for Him. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the next thing is, the intellect helps you know right from wrong. So actively engaging the things that you're doing and really thinking about them, that helps you know right from wrong, but it's through your heart that you experience the world and connecting with it. And one of my teachers, Dr. Umar Farooq Abdullah, he says that how can you create vertically with Allah if you can't create or connect? How can you connect vertically with Allah if you can't connect with His creation horizontally? So we need to really consider that. Again, and this goes along with that connection with the creation, knowing your Lord through it and experiencing the different things that are out there, whether it's nature, other human beings. Sometimes you could meet a really beautiful human being and you can see Allah's creation in that person. Think about that. That's really powerful. And then also, like I mentioned earlier, the benefit of community, it normalizes the struggles that you're going through. And then a big thing that people don't realize is, and this is again in our Quran, the whole concept of us sometimes thinking we're self-sufficient, that we can handle everything on our own, right? Like not only just from Allah and how we're utterly dependent upon Him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the problem is, when it comes to us feeling self-sufficient, then we struggle with connection with other people. And you ask any married person how much they rely on their family, whether it's, my wife is going to the hospital having a baby and I have a son at home and I need someone to take care of my son, connection with your neighbors. I still remember we had 5 kids in my family. And my father, I came down, I don't know, it's a Mexican thing but I came down in my underwear and the next door neighbor lady was sitting on the couch. I was like, oh, and I was like, ran upstairs, put on some pajamas, then I came downstairs, and this is when I was 5, if I didn't make that clear. And then I was like, where are my parents? She said, they took your father took your mother to the hospital. She's having a baby. And so I was like, oh, okay. This happened, you need to rely on your community, whether it's your neighbors, your family, and you need that family connection. So many times, I always say that too, is like, alhamdulillah for family and the love and the connection that you can get from them, and we're constantly working on that. And this is why we're required to maintain ties with our kin, because of the benefit for that, the mutual benefit for that. Before I talk about millennials really quickly, I'm going to go back so you guys don't read that. But just a couple other things that Brother Altaf was saying was this whole idea of exposing our brains to these things on the internet. One of the things as therapists that we're trained to be aware of is this concept of secondary trauma, meaning that we're working with people all day. We're working with people all day that are telling you about these very challenging things they've been through in life, okay? And if we don't find a way of channeling some of that stress, of what they say, sharpening the saw, when you take a break, giving yourself a break and keeping yourself healthy, it starts to have an emotional effect on you. So most people in this room haven't been trained that way. So when you're exposing yourself to all these images of death or nudity or all these other things on a computer, how they're affecting your brain, you need to really be concerned about that. And when it comes to nudity, for example, I'm going to warn the brothers mostly. You don't know how many times I'm working with young people who are struggling in their marriage because of things they expose their brain to beforehand. So the concept of I can expose myself to this until I get married and then I'll be fine, get that out of your mind. It's not the same thing. It doesn't work like that. So the concept of millennials is really interesting because there's some treatment programs for therapy and drug use and everything else in the western suburbs of Chicago that have done some research on the millennials, and basically it's the age 18 to 27. Raise your hand if you're in that category. Okay, 18 to 27. And they said basically we need to train ourselves how to work with these people because they're different. They're different. And this is how they described it. I got it right off their website. Technologically savvy, rapidly communicating, often learning in non-traditional digital ways. As a result, they're accustomed to being overstimulated. It's a treatment provider's challenge to reach millennials with novel interventions and technically up-to-date strategies while attempting to teach survival skills. So here are things they're saying that your generation is struggling with: self-regulation, survival skills, the concept of I can be exposed to this, anything I want this fast, and have to wait for it, right? Like Brother Tuff says, something's not downloading properly, or I'm waiting for a search or something like that. I'll just switch to something else. I'll switch to something else. Well, human beings don't function like that with each other. So we need to be careful of this and how this has affected us. And again, ihsan, the concept of getting close to your Lord starts with first self-perfection, looking at yourself. What's wrong with me? Why do I struggle with things I struggle with? Thank you. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. We're going to go into the question and answer session with Brother Altaf and Brother Edmund, inshallah.
Stay awake, yeah. We're still ending at 6:15? We're still ending at 6:15? Oh, 6:30. 6:30, okay, all right. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. I try to just collapse the questions into categories, and this one was a lot to do about limits that we should be setting, and then and basically how to operate, because someone said like they have an online business, someone else said they have online classes and a lot of homework that they have to do online, or at least to be online most of the time. Someone else, basically asked about setting limits in the cyber world, and then others said, that they basically can't live without it. So one of the first things to say about this is that, you're responsible. Among the things the Prophet ﷺ said, that take advantage of 5 before 5. One of them was your free time before you become occupied. And believe me, you have absolutely no idea what free time is or how valuable it is until you're married and have kids. Is that right? I'm serious. Like, you would give anything to just have like a few minutes to yourselves. Anything. So you have a lot of that time. You're young enough to be able to stay awake late as much as you want because your bodies can withstand that now. But what you're doing with that time is very critical. So limits that we would recommend in terms of this is basically do what's functional. Like if you're needing to go online to do something, if you need to set up on your cell phone or any other clock, a timer, that say, I'm only going to do this for like 15 minutes and that's it. And whatever happens after that, I don't care, because there's nothing urgent, and anybody who really needs to reach me urgently is going to know, in terms of family, how to get to me. If you can do that, if you can survive that 15 minutes, you'll be amazed. One of the things that Brother Edmund was referring to is that not only did that young student who was suffering with the physics homework and then multitasking, that you think you can listen to music and do this and do that, the amazing thing is you actually take longer to do those same things, just because your brain is trying to do all those things simultaneously. Inevitably, the quality is poor. So number one, set a limit, a time limit in terms of what you're going to do. Number two, set a limit as to the number of things that you're going to do. So if you're going on to check email, and many of you may be in youth groups, you may be organizing things, you may be involved. So we live like that. I mean, we're not saying, be completely like cave-like, right? You go on it, but then say that, in fact, journal it and say, I'm going to go on to do this, this, and this, and make a to-do list for online. And that's all you do. And that's not a bad thing. So when you do that, you come off of that, you can reward yourself. If you found focus, instead of waiting another 2-3 hours before checking, I'm going to check in another hour and a half. But again, I'm going to do it at a limited time. Third, start to convey and relate those limits to your family and friends. See, the worst thing you can do is start to do the whole self-reform, and then people start bashing on you online, right? People will do that. They're like, you think you're all that, right? Left all of us here to suffer in fitna world, right? No, just tell them, I'm going to do this. In Ramadan, I saw a lot of Facebook statuses, I'm going to be gone. After suhoor, I'm not going to be online until like after Taraweeh prayers. And then even then for a little bit. And that was fine. It was great. Actually, I thought like, wow, how liberating, right? That people could do that. If you convey those limits, you don't seem as spiritually arrogant about what you're trying to get done. You just say, this is what I'm doing, right? Convey those limits so that they can know. And then lastly, the question related to that was, what types of things should you be doing? What types of... See, this is critical. This is critical. Because why you get online, there should be a mission statement that you should write for why you get online. And if you can do that in like 25 words, you'll be amazed as to how little purpose there is for why we actually get online. If you get online to organize, if you get online to convey, important things. Like I have a brother, subhanAllah, he asked me one time, I met him at a camp, he's like, do you mind if I take your cell number? I go, no problem. He goes, do you need to talk? He said, no, I'm just going to text hadith. I text people one hadith on Jummah. Every Friday I text one hadith. I was like, no problem, right? I did it. I gave it to him. What's the purpose of that interaction? What are you going to do? I'll tell you frankly. He was mentioning about infidelity. That's like, at a teenage level, you might not be thinking about it because you're thinking, oh, I'm not even married yet. But you can actually create all of the framework of infidelity even as teenagers, even without commitments to any one person in terms of a marital relationship. Because you'll be like, you know what, she doesn't know I'm gaming this girl, or he doesn't know that I'm with, right? And you start doing that, and then the worlds start to collide, right? They start to collide because the person you didn't think knew the other person start to friend the other one. You're like, oh, God, right? How did they meet, right? My worlds are colliding. What's your purpose? Why are you online, right? When you listen to stuff. Music. Someone said about music, limits. Basically what? If it starts to engross you into a way that draws you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you shouldn't be doing it. But there's so much in music that can move you to remember Allah, but it can't replace adhkar. Are you following me? You can't replace adhkar just because the song has a lot of words like love you, love you, love you. You're like, well, every time he says something else, I say love you, Allah, right? Love you, Allah, right? All right, come on, stop it. Just stop it, right? You're not fooling them. You're not fooling anybody. Just cut it out, right? Don't be stupid about it. Sorry. Whoop, rewind, right? Don't do that. It doesn't make sense. So 3 things about the types of entertainment to choose. 1, do not allow for themes or images that you wouldn't allow in real life. You frankly would not allow a naked woman to come to your front door and any parents would open that door and say, please walk in. You wouldn't. You wouldn't allow anybody with guns to the front door and say, oh yeah, please, make yourself at home in the living room, right? You wouldn't. But these games have that. These games have imagery very related to that. The movies have it. The shows have it. So why are we allowing things that we wouldn't allow in the real world? Secondly, watch the pace of activity. Watch it carefully. The reason kindergarten teachers are losing their minds trying to keep the attention of our children is because they are attempting to do this. A is for apple. And the kids are like, where's the apple, right? They're like, where's the music? Where's the soundtrack? Because everything in life has a soundtrack. No, it doesn't, right? Most of our life has no soundtrack, but that's what they're used to. So now they have to do, fast-paced imagery. So the apple has to like run across the blackboard or the whiteboard or anything, and they're like, oh, that's an apple, right? But if it moves that fast, they can't concentrate. They can't read. They can't stop to focus. Attention deficit is a massive issue, not just in the Muslim community, but society at large. And then the last part of that was basically limited exposure. When I told you about the 20-minute thing, it's not a joke. It is real. It is real. Omar has 20 minutes of online time. Ahmed has 20 minutes of video time, right? So now they got smart. They're like, well, if Omar and I, we put our time together, can we do it like right after each other? So then we can watch like 40 minutes? And we're like, okay, yeah, that's a good one, right? You can do that. But that's it for the rest of the week, right? But limits, if you set those limits, believe me, you'll go much farther and you'll be happier when you look back at what you were able to accomplish. We want success stories in the Muslim community. We don't want a lot of tragedies. We can avert it because our religion has given us a lot of those framework and solutions, but you have to exert the effort. Try some downtime this conference. Try to put your status up to be offline in this conference, and see if you can text less in this conference. See if you can, talk less on the phone and just chit-chat less in this conference. See if you stop checking your emails less in this conference. That will be the test. If you can't do it here while we're talking about it, I don't know what's going to happen when you're without the rest of the company of the beloved people around you. Jazakumullah khairan.
Assalamu alaikum. So I wanted to answer a few of the questions. One of them, it's a good question because I mentioned both concepts. The concept of solitude versus isolation. Right? Isolation meaning that there's no interaction with other people. Solitude is specific time that you set aside for yourself, right? Outside of the community and everything, all the other involvement. But isolation is one that's where you're not interacting at all. Okay. So at least that's how I'm using it today. And then also, someone asked me if my Islam, my beliefs skew my advice in therapy and counseling. One of the things that we are trained to do is try to be, as careful as we can to not to use our own experiences and project them on other people in counseling. But the reality is that your paradigm does affect how you work with people. The beauty is that before I converted to Islam in graduate school. So I was studying this psychology of human beings, and found that most of what we teach is supported by our faith. And so when you see some of the illness in society, and you see that we're told as Muslims to avoid it, you understand why. But at the same time, when it comes to working with clients, if they're Christian, I don't talk about Islam with them. I asked them, one of the things that we're trained at in my graduate school is to find people's strengths, and if faith is a strength for them in their life, then we go with that. Even in working with Muslims, one of the things I have to gauge is faith important in their life? If it's not, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it unless they I'm going into too much detail, but so yes, it probably does influence me a little bit, but I think every therapist has their influence based on their own experiences and their beliefs. The last one that I will talk about briefly is there's two. One's really quick. One says all the suggestions speakers gave were regarding limits using technology and not how to properly use it. I mean, every family is different, and your job and your life is different. So for us to tell you how you should integrate it into your life, I don't know that we can do that. But I think the important message really just is limit it. Don't let it overtake your life. I think really that's what we're talking about. Because it's become such a huge part. Like Brother Altaf said when he first came up here, we're not up here to say technology's bad, don't use any. It's really about moderation, like Brother Umar said as well. So one of the last comments someone said was, in regards to some video games, that the research doesn't necessarily say that they're related to desensitization, and that this isn't something that's replicated in other countries, and then also military run through simulations and everything else. In case of desensitization, I was talking about more real images on the internet. But as far as the war games and those other things, you really got to consider, like Brother Altaf said, there's a lot of research that hasn't been done, but you just got to really consider in general how these fast-acting video games and other things are having an effect on us as a society. The reality is, women are far surpassing men now in college, on standardized tests, in college attendance, and all these. And I think one of the reasons is because video games are so addictive to boys, and there is video game addiction as well. There's some research out there that says that video games can hit the pleasure sensor, the same one that crack cocaine does in the brain. They can give that kind of satisfaction when you do really well. And I've talked about this before, is that also if you're not doing well, it allows you to reset it, and that's not how life is. Right, so there are all these things that go along with it, and sure, there's no direct correlation that if you play this video game, you're going to become violent. But I think if you combine it right, you play these video games, and you isolate yourself from society, and you happen to have violent problems and access to guns, that's how this kind of stuff happens that happened in Connecticut. You know, some of the things that they're talking about. So, and that gets really scary. So if any one of those things we can remove it from the equation, it might help. I think we should be careful about that. Thank you, Jazakallah khair.
Just very quickly. So just very quickly, a couple other ones. Somebody asked, you know, this always comes up, is music haram? It's like Imam al-Shaheed Hassan al-Banna, when he was asked about cinema or movies, he said, "As-cinema halal, halal, as-cinema haram, haram." So music that's halal is halal, music that's haram is haram. And if you don't get it, have dinner and then we can talk, inshallah. Someone said about memory, if they're having trouble remembering things related with the internet, hard to diagnose that immediately, but it would be something you should look into is in terms of focus. If it's not actually maybe remembering things, but if you're ever even taking it in the first place, because memorization involves a process of getting it in and then retaining it. And if you're not able to do that, you may not have even memorized anything. And then what's the difference between watching a lecture online and in real life? Real life basically is encouraged, but not all of us have access to real-life conferences and lectures. So to watch lectures online about Islam is not a problem. But even then you can get carried away, because then you could actually end up doing what some people say, you know, well, you think in 20 years we'll be able to pray Taraweeh prayer at home? I'm like, how? So like, you know, in front of the HD TV and follow the Imam. I'm like, okay, just don't bump your head on the screen, right? When you try to go for sujood. I don't know what to make of it. It's like, I don't even know how to answer that. But you can overdo it. You can also overdo the real life, the lectures online. And then lastly about, you know, being social and, you know, even with your family and friends, really, you know, this starts at birth. We really have to start working with our kids at birth and help them to understand every single thing they do has an impact. When they're being rough, we have to talk to them. When they're being kind, we have to congratulate them or appreciate it. When they're being compassionate, we have to talk about it. You know, teach them to hug, to kiss. And this was something the Prophet ﷺ did a lot. To the extent that one of the Arab who came to see him, and he saw ﷺ kiss one of his grandchildren, and the Arab said to him, Ajib, like I have 10 children, and I've never kissed one of them. Because this was not something he had been socialized to do. So if we socialize our kids to do this, inshallah, the interactions will take care of themselves, and they will be guided with, you know, not only love and compassion and mercy, but more so respect and haya and modesty, inshallah, between the genders. Jazakumullah khairan. And I do know that the marriage lecture we had over there at 3 o'clock that ended like at 4:15, 4 o'clock, the Q&A for that is going to be at 6:45 back in the same banquet hall room that we were in the Sheraton. Jazakumullah khairan.
Jazakumullah khairan to our speakers. Subhanallah wa bihamdih. I'm sorry, there was an announcement I need to make. Oh yes, last announcement. The Riza is selling their plates of dinner outside, and they've been lowered to $8 per plate. So if you'd like to enjoy some delicious Persian food, that'd be awesome.